So, language is the human phenomenon. We learn about our own identity and we learn about the identity of others around the world through language. When you throw in a rubber chicken, what you have is Brenda Buckley, my guest for today. I had a little excerpt from Brenda as I caught her in the corridor on the way to her session, Teach Like a Rebel, at the Northeast Conference. I invited her to come back for a full podcast. I wanted to hear more about what she does with American Sign Language, about how she inspires students from underprivileged backgrounds, about her story and the story of how we work to develop mindsets that can change the lives of young people that are challenged in today's world. I hope you'll enjoy this podcast, and I hope you'll check out her story, the many resources that she's shared directly with you on my website, fluency.consulting. Enjoy and profit from the insights that Brenda Buckley brings about the nature of humanity and about encouraging all in a challenging world. Brenda Buckley, welcome to the conversation today.
Thank you for having me.
It's a lot of fun. And I sure enjoyed our time at the Northeast Conference when we met. But I'm very excited about sharing your insights, your history, your impact with the listeners today. You have over 15 years of experience in urban education and specializing in American Sign Language. I'd love for you to give us a little background into that, why you start with that, why that's important, what's that identity, where you're coming from with all of that.
All right. So let me give you a little background. Originally, not the plan. My goal was to work at a school for the deaf teaching art. So I had to know, sign language in order to teach at a school for the deaf. And I started there subbing, but then I had a city school contact me and they were looking for an ASL teacher. So they asked me if I would come in for an interview and I needed a full-time job. I went in there and I did not know what to expect. It was a very different experience even with the interview. But over the years, I have really really enjoyed it. And I'm able to do so many different things and bring the students into a whole new world, I guess, even with language and culture and the activities. So I thank the students for allowing me to, touch into my inner child again and bring that out, and two, for allowing me to continue to enjoy my job every day. And I think that's a thing that, sometimes can get hard with education, depending on politics and all of those things. But the students are the ones that make it fun. And sometimes I do tell the students, it's not about you today, it's about me. But that's just because I like to change it up and get them out. I think a lot of students right now are very focused on staying inside, being on the phone, really into those things instead of getting out and experience it. And once I can get them out, then the buy-in starts. So that's once I started seeing these bright eyes and these kids just enjoying and having fun instead of focusing on a cell phone or some kind of device and being to themselves, I really wanted to kind of take on with that and keep going.
Phenomenal. And it really brings them alive. You do a lot of, by definition, with ASL body work.
Yes.
And there's so many courses where students are sitting all of the time and brains on sticks, if we overstate it. But the ASL is by definition motion. Language in general is a body phenomenon. What is it that led you to ASL and then to indeed the teaching of ASL now?
I went to school for art.
Okay.
And I had to take a language, and they did not have French. I took French for 5 years before that. I was on the dance team, and a bunch of the girls were taking American Sign Language, and they were having fun with it. And I thought if I ever needed help, I would have a bunch of people that were already in the course. But because of I'm very animated to begin with, and with dancing and all the other stuff that I've done in the past growing up, I grabbed onto that course right away. I was just captivated by it. I was still an art major, and I started taking another class and then another class and another class. Then I got close to a minor, and I was might as well minor in it. And then I kept going and going. And then my senior year, my advisor said, you know, like if you just double up like 2 classes, you will major in this too. I was like, why? Well, why not? And then I got to thinking, well, what do I do with art and ASL? These are really 2 weird things. How can I combine them? Because I love both, but I couldn't think of what job would do that. And I really just loved being in the deaf community. I actually felt more free and more alive. And I want to say myself in a way, because I felt like I was able to express myself better in sign language than I am in English, because I do have a learning disability, and sometimes, you know, I struggle with the English part. So yeah, that was, I just wanted that feeling of feeling part of a group, and I just loved the way I felt when I was signing. So then I went to RIT for deaf education, and my goal was, okay, I'm going to teach art in a deaf school. But that's a little bit harder than you think, because there's not that many deaf schools out there. But yeah, that's kind of how I got into it. It was all by accident, and it was probably the best accident ever.
You know, it's interesting how much you have emphasized here something that is so important. The deaf community, having the deaf culture, having the deaf feel about things. And here you are, a hearing person, feeling so comfortable in deaf community. Talk a little bit about the experience that you have had, again, you as a hearing person, with what you discovered about the deaf community and about the warmth and the experience that you just alluded to.
Well, I went to school in Rochester, and that is one of the largest deaf communities. With school, we were required to go to a deaf community event each, I think each month. I think it was each month. And that got you out into the community. And they have different events depending on where you are. Like, for example, here where I live now, every Tuesday they meet at Panera Bread, but it rotates around the city. So it was like the first Tuesdays in one town, the second Tuesdays in another, third Tuesday. And Rochester has a lot more events than that because the population is so large of deaf people. There's tons of different things you can do, but that's their way of kind of coming together and just keeping the love going. And they are very, very used to students coming because they knew the teachers in the community would push the students out into the community and just like basically throw them in like, all right, here you go. You're going to survive. Which is where I actually learned the language a lot more than just by sitting in class, was just getting out there. And everybody that goes to those events that is deaf know that students are going to be showing up, and they're willing to work with them and help them and try to communicate with them. They'll teach them too. You know, they just don't give them like the words or the whatever. So they're teachers as well, I would say, in the community, because they want more people to be able to communicate and utilize the language, especially in an area that has the population is so large for deaf people. So I definitely felt in all of those events that it was very welcoming, and people were willing to work with you, even if you were struggling, and not judge you.
That's huge. That's huge. You know, the listeners are some in education, others in business, industry, organizations, and a variety of places around the world. And so they may or may not be familiar with the fact that ASL enrollments are growing in the United States. And can you address that, why the enrollments are growing, what some of the impact of ASL programs are, and potentially, if you know about what sign language, the various national sign languages are doing around the world, what the experience is there, if you have that background to be able to address that a little bit.
I think sign language is growing for many reasons. It's also not only the fact that it's a language, it's also a great form of communication for students with special needs if they can't, verbally express themselves, which helps with a lot of behavior problems too. So I do teach a communication course as well for special needs students, but it's important to know that there is a difference between it, like teaching American Sign Language and then teaching some signs to help like communication. So that's more of a total communication mode. But I I just really think that everyone is seeing it as such a benefit to more than just people who are hard of hearing or deaf. And also our population, we're starting to recognize deaf culture more. And I say deaf culture because people that are very involved in deaf culture, they do not see themselves any different than a hearing person, except for the fact that they can't hear. They don't feel handicapped. They don't feel disabled. They feel that they can do anything but hear. And I, especially now during COVID, now that we're starting to see the interpreters around and everyone is starting to recognize, oh my gosh, we have to give communication and provide this for the people in especially the US. And, we're recognizing that. And I think that's awesome. And now people are really also, I just think it's such a beautiful language and people are really fascinated with it because you get to see it like happen instead of just listening. You get to watch it. And I always hear my coworkers or students are just so captivated. Like, did you see that woman? Did you see her facial expressions? Did you see her body movement? Did you see everything? So I think people are really like tuned into that too. And they just think it's just a beautiful language. And there's just so many opportunities and things that you can do with the language, besides communicate with a deaf person.
Mm-hmm. Now, you just brought up something so important there, the difference between, in this case, American Sign Language and teaching signs to help to have some breakthroughs for students that might need that communication help. Speak more about that, please, and your work with students that have some specific educational needs.
Absolutely. It started about, 4 years ago. There was a class that it was students with autism. It was an autism program, and it was in our building. And I had a teacher who was using some signs with the readings. However, they weren't correct. And she asked me for help, and she was really receptive to all of it. Like, she wanted to do it correctly. She wanted to make sure everything was right, because some of these kids go into homes too, and they do utilize the communication modes, and some of the workers there do as well. But then it just kind of got into the point where I would kind of push in, and I pushed in on my own time, like my own planning time, and helped the kids with some of the signs, with the images and the reading and the listening all together. And the students were really starting to pick it up. And they also were starting to recognize by listening to a word and doing the sign, because some of them really needed a visual before they could even recognize the word or listening to it. The visual is what caught them first. And then gradually the auditory part came. The following year, they got rid of my hall duty and then kept me pushing in. And then eventually it just became a course that was directly just for them. Because I pushed for that. I pushed for that so hard because I was trying to tell them, this is not a class where we can teach American Sign Language. They need to utilize this to communicate. They don't need to, learn deaf history and, they need this specific tool to help them communicate in the future, just day to day, to do daily activities. So some their the language is tough for them, and some of them don't even speak. Some of them are mute. Some of them just can't form the words and stuff that they want, so that they try to speak with it and add the signs. That's, very helpful. And we also got the speech teacher. She took a course and she utilizes some of the signs with the words too when she's working with them and putting it all together. And we've just seen so much growth. And it's the best thing to see. All of a sudden it's the kid just uses the sign the right way. And I'm like, how are you today? And then they sign good back. I'm like, oh my gosh, I haven't heard anything from you in 3 months and you got it. That to me is just amazing. This kid has not been able to communicate. And even though I voiced, how are you today? And he signed back good, that's awesome.
What is happening inside a young person, any age, but here you're specifically talking about young people? What's happening in the brain? What's happening in the spirit?
So I have tapped into research like crazy. I honestly don't know how or why. I kind of remember now. I did a book study, and it was engaging students in poverty. And there were so many things that I was reading, and I said to myself, oh, that's why? Oh, that's why? oh, that's why. I mean, even to the point where I'm a volleyball coach and some of the things the girls were doing for volleyball, I'm like, oh, that's why. I did not realize how much poverty really affects language. But I was picking it up on my own. Like the book was not saying like, oh, this is all about language. So I had to go in and really dig and like learn more. But it was just mind-boggling to me. And there's 7 engagement factors when I looked into some other books about students learning in poverty. And one is health and nutrition, the other is vocabulary, effort and energy, your mindset, cognitive capacity, relationships, and stress level. All of those things that are normal, like they're like a huge thing, right? Stuff that we do every day. Those things, if they don't have access the correct way, it decreases vocabulary, it decreases phonological awareness, your syntax, your working memory, and a bunch of different developmental stages. And there's a lot of studies out there that show if you can't grasp onto the grammar in your native language, you're going to struggle with grasping on to grammar in a second language. The mind is a huge thing in this. And the one thing that I really went into the most was the working memory, and how much the working memory, when I started reading these books just based on brain development, not necessarily, students in poverty, the working memory does a lot with language. So I was thinking, how do I get this working memory to like increase for my students? So I was looking at all the different things that you can do to expand your working memory. And a lot was like exercise and different things. So I was trying to take, okay, I want to utilize the language, do these activities, get the buy-in for the kids, but also expand their working memory so it opens up. So they're starting to pull in the language more. But at the same time, the kids don't realize it because we're just having a blast.
How do you do that? I mean, at this particular point, I might return to the chicken. And maybe you want to tell the listeners why I would refer to the chicken, but connect, please, what you mean, how that happens. What are some of the things that you do in the stories that you can tell us about that?
Absolutely. I've done all these activities that I'll explain, but when I changed it to Fun Yay Friday, so we do Fun Yay Friday, and those were when I would do the activities. But I would also, inform the students if we had snow days or whatever, if something got shifted, I would just be like, guys, please bear with me this Friday. We can't do Fun Yay Friday. But they were good about it because we did it so much. And those are when I would introduce the different activities that would get the students moving. And the other thing too with the research is talking about like moving them in different locations or around the building. That kind of helps as well. So the activities that I did, I tried to take them out of the classroom as much as possible. So we had more space and more space to be free and or like be outside as much as we could. And those activities were whole group activities. Everybody's involved and everybody's moving. Now with these activities, I don't necessarily stress, I would say, staying in the target language the whole entire time, because the students are having so much fun and laughing and working with each other that I'm building a community as well. And that's what I need for them to continue to develop the language too and want to work with each other. So my Fun Day Fridays are not necessarily like 90% target language. I still try to get them like to remember and do it, but sometimes it just gets a little crazy and we're just laughing and having so much fun. But the point of the activity at that time is to open up the working memory. So then we're developing it. So then later when we're doing more language, they can pull it in. So that is like the main purpose. Because I know some people are really stressed on being like 90% all the time, but that is not the goal. That's not the goal of the activity, is the 90% of the target language. The goal of the activity is to open up the working memory to help attain language later. So the chicken activity we're talking about, that's like one of the famous ones. And I do it in all the presentations I do for Teach Like a Rebel. And even if people have already been to my session like more than one time, they still want to do it because depending on my students, like sometimes a new little tweak could happen or a new addition to the game or change in it. And I usually negotiate with the students on that stuff. So those games develop as well. But that chicken one is just so fun. You just have to do a sequence of anything in a language over and over again, and they're two teams competing against each other, and they have to throw this chicken as far as possible, and the other team has to complete the task while the one is chasing the chicken, bringing it back, going over the head, under the legs, over the head, under the legs until they get to the end. And then when that person throws the chicken, the other team now has to run. Like they have to end the task and run. So if they finish the task, they get a point, but they can do the task more than one time, if that makes sense. So however long it takes the people to get the chicken, if they complete the task twice, then they get 2 points. So we go up to 10, and it's just hilarious because no matter what, someone forgets to chase the chicken, someone forgets to go over and under. So all of a sudden, they don't even know their alphabet or numbers. And I'm talking like adults too, because there's just so much going on. It's crazy. And when I was doing it with the adults at the last conference, like we were doing the alphabet. And I was like, we're just going to say it out loud because we all, in English, because we all teach different languages. I'm telling you, like nobody could remember the alphabet at all. It was just insane. Like and that's what I'm saying. And that's when you get to the point where everyone's laughing and they're all like a mess and they're helping each other, but they all just want the points and they want to get the chicken. So yeah, sometimes the target language goes out the door and I'm still pulling it back in and I'm like, no, like signing it to them. Like, this is where you are. This is where you are, pay attention. But I'll tell you what, it's a lot of work on my body though, too. I'm telling you, I like put my Apple Watch on. I was like, all right, let's see like how many calories we burn just doing this. Cause I'm staying with them, trying to keep them to do that task. And the reason why we use the chickens, and this is what I tell anybody, you don't have to use a chicken. I was just so obsessed. I watched this like baseball activity and I got an inspiration to create a game from this like baseball and it had a chicken in it. And I was like, I need a rubber chicken. I need a rubber chicken. And the best thing about the rubber chicken is when you throw it, it like dead stops on the ground. So if you use a ball, it keeps rolling and it's just so much harder for the other team to go get it. So the chicken just like flaps dead and it's just easier. And like, why not have a rubber chicken? So it's fun.
Well, besides, rubber chickens are by definition funny, right? I mean, you start out.
And they got all these cool ones now too. Like the ones I was giving out had like rock star glasses and like they're all fancy. One had like an old lady wig on it. Like you could tell the chicken was actually dressed up. And I was like, I just have like, your original flat chicken. And I had to have my mom find me this chicken that did not have a squeak in it. That's what I wanted for Christmas in my 30s. Okay. Like I needed this chicken and she found one because everything else like has the squeaking in it. I was like, no way, the kids are gonna be squeaking that all day. I can't do that.
And I'm going to make sure that people recognize that I will be pointing them to my website to make sure that they find out from you, connect up with you and find some of these resources that you're alluding to. I'll be referring to that again at the end, but this is a perfect time when the chicken comes to play. Now, you mentioned there back a while in this particular sequence about community. It strikes me that you've ramped it up based not just on your personality, which clearly has a lot of energy, but on your understanding of how, especially those who have most need of help in learning, react to physicality and community. Am I saying it right?
Yes. So I was a child in high school that just could not grasp onto anything. And I always just felt left behind. And that was one thing I never wanted any of my students to feel. I didn't ever want them to feel the way that I felt. That was one big thing. The other thing is the fact, well, as a language, everybody knows you have to communicate with somebody else because you can't just talk to yourself or sign to yourself on a regular basis. You're not going to get anywhere with that. And it's important for the students to sign with anybody and everybody as possible because just like spoken languages where the voices are different and the accents and things like that, it's the same with sign language. Your hand shapes are different. The way you can form it depending on, like I said, the size of your hand, the size of your fingers, everybody is a little bit different. And I know for me, I always had a hard time understanding old men with short, stubby fingers. And I know this sounds funny, but because like the way, they would make some of the hand shapes, I just couldn't really see it. I mean, now it's all easy for me because I've been exposed to so much, but that is a huge thing in my room that I want everyone to be able to sign with each other and not just be used to seeing me or, their best friend, John. And it's a huge difference. So we talk about that. And the other thing was when I started my first research, it was in a growth mindset. I was honestly just not in a good place. I was just diagnosed with a disease. I was coming out of a coach position, like a teacher on assignment. I moved back to my hometown and I was going back into the classroom. And I wasn't in the classroom for a long time. And I was terrified. Like I felt like I was a brand new teacher again. I'm in a new school district. And I was just lost. And I was like, how can I get these kids to buy in? How can we like all have fun? So I did a lot of search myself and like growing myself, my growth mindset. And then when I was reading so much about it, my students need this. Like, we're going to do this together. We're going to grow together. And when I started the year off, and I still do this to this day, I start the year off with doing all these growth mindsets, these activities where they're even forced to see, like, just eye contact is so important. So even in a circle, if a kid's uncomfortable and they're not making eye contact right away, eventually, the more that you do a circle, they don't realize that they're actually starting to respect and get a little bit more comfortable with the people in the circle, because it is uncomfortable to begin with, because especially with students, they're just not used to making eye contact. Well, in the culture that I work in too, they're not used to eye contact. And sign language is huge on eye contact. You really need that. And just by them being in a circle alone, and that's why I tell anybody, do anything in a circle, even if it's a reading or whatever, just that little thing, they don't realize it. They're seeing people's mannerisms. They're seeing the way their body movement is. They're seeing the way, and they feel more comfortable, like they know who the person is, instead of staring at the back of their head all the time in a class, right? Depending on how you are with that. And then I introduce more and more activities where we're getting a little bit more vulnerable with each other. I demonstrate it all. And, and it's always whole class. That is the huge thing. It is always whole class. And people ask me, well, what if these two kids don't want to do it in the beginning? I don't force them. They want to sit on the outside, they can. But I'll tell you what, eventually they start to kind of creep in, because now they want to be a part of it, or there's that one thing that they saw that they really wanted to be a part of, and that how everybody's just working together. And, if they're making fun of each other, it's because they're all doing it in a fun, loving way, but not in a bullying way. And I think that that's a huge, huge thing, all for language. And then once I get that in, then I start introducing more of the crazy stuff, the exercising, the moving around, the getting out and being vulnerable. That's the biggest thing we talk about too, like vulnerability. Like, you're going to make mistakes. It's a language, and I make mistakes all the time. And I always say teach or fail every time I do it, because I want them to recognize, like, I'll, especially moving from school to school or building or room to room, and I'm bringing stuff in, and I was like, all right, guys, we're going to do this activity. And I like open up my bag and, no, we're not going to do this activity because Buckley left it in the other room, like teach or fail. And they just see that it's just a comfortable environment to be in, that they're not held to this expectation of being perfect. And I don't grade like that either. I don't grade and you need to be perfect. But we talk about, I give out tickets, you sign, you did your sign-in activity. It's okay that you made mistakes. You tried to stay in the target language. It was quiet the whole time. And we talk about trying to get it across in another way. What if you're out with a bunch of deaf people and you can't think of a sign, or how would you communicate? How would you do that? And they get a ticket, and they're obsessed with these tickets. Okay. They get a ticket for every activity, but they love that because that's like participation, and they have that ticket. They get to hold it. They know that they did what they were supposed to do, but they didn't have to be perfect. They didn't have to have every single thing correct. They did not. So they're willing to try more because they know it's okay to make mistakes. And I think that's a huge thing for language.
It sure is. And that's growth mindset in action. Do you reflect to the students what you're doing with that at some point, helping them to understand that this is called a growth mindset that they're developing? Or do you just let it sort of evolve behind the scenes?
I throw it in there. I don't purposely. I did try one year, like my first year, I was like, we're just going to learn growth mindset. We're going to look at this rubric. We're going to do this. I don't do that anymore, but I do throw it out there, and I do throw in important words, like affirmations, like positive affirmations for yourself, or usually, because the population I'm in, I'll be like, check yourself. And they know that means, oh, wait, like, how did I respond to myself on that? How did I do that? and they're just naturally developing it. But other times I'll be like, that's not a growth mindset. You need to do da da da. Like, I just throw it out there instead of necessarily being like, this is what it is. This is how you work with it. This is how that. The other thing is, if I see a student that's just really struggling in life, just with more, and then the language and everything else, because everything that, like I said, those 7 engagement factors have a huge influence on developing language. And if that's a like craziness and disaster out there in that world, and then trying to come into school, it's going to make it hard. I do like pull kids aside and we kind of talk about that. And I've some of the books that you'll see that I will recommend, I will give them to the students. Some of them are very easy reads, or I'll pull out like a couple sheets and be like, hey, just, copy it. Like, why don't you just read this when you get home? Because I know they can connect to that specific part. And I think that's important too. So yeah, that part is a little, we're not in the language with that part, but if you are not comfortable with yourself, you're not going to be able to be comfortable in trying to learn another language and utilize it with people like native speakers or signers.
Absolutely right. And, part of what folks will see on your biography, as you've been alluding to these things, but I'm going to zero in on your experience in urban education. And you've mentioned, folks in poverty and so forth. Address some of the aspects of what that specialization, those two areas, but urban and poverty, either together, how they differ, however you'd like to approach it to help people understand what that specialization on your part means in an educational setting.
Well, the largest thing is what the students are encountering every single day outside of school. That affects everything that they do when they come into school, and they don't even realize it. So the trauma, anything like that. So they're having a day and they're going off the rails, but they're, coming at you, coming at another student, don't like the activity. That I've learned is not the issue. The issue is something else. We just got to the point where like, okay, something triggered or happened, and now you're at your breaking point. But I need to, as a teacher, not be offended or I'm like, this kid is, cussing me out. That does happen in the city schools, and it's happened a lot, but it's not really because of me. It's something else that's underlined. So that's why when I do all these activities, I want them to be aware of who they can be inside, how they can control themselves, and then especially that my classroom is like when you walk into school, you are in control. Sometimes what happens at home, you can't be in control, but I want them to be as comfortable as possible. And also, like I was telling you, with all these activities, just feel free and have that kid feeling, because some of them didn't get to experience it either because they've been taking care of their siblings. Like they have to adult a lot faster. There's a lot of my students that are in poverty than, other students in schools. And that's a big thing. The other thing is dealing with attendance. Like, how do we keep the kids going? How do I keep the kids with the language and understanding with attendance issues? And again, that could be because they have to stay home and take care of somebody, or they have to work and make more money. And those are huge factors when anybody's teaching. So the approach is definitely different than what I felt like I went to grad school for, and like, this is how you teach. Here's your lesson plan. Here's this, here's that. And that's why I call the session Teach Like a Rebel, even because when administration or the school district, sorry guys, they come out and say, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to do this. And I'm like, cool, that's great. That's not going to work. That's not going to, like everything. I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but everything that I've really pushed on and I've done. But I also take students, I interview them too, or survey them, or ask them just you like it? We don't like it. Why don't we like it? What could we do better? How could we change it? I get their input too, so they can buy in. But the things that they need are not the things that necessarily a district might keep pushing out. Like that's not how they're going to learn. That's not how they're going to obtain. I understand education is changing. I do. And we want to try all these things. But if we can't get to that, like we have to start somewhere to get to that level. You can't just naturally, wake up one day and be like, all right, we're here. Everyone's at this level. Okay, great. We're moving on. That's not a thing. And The other reason why it's called Teach Like a Rebel, because sometimes I do get in trouble for running in the halls. One time I got in trouble for the kids being on a desk, like standing on a desk. But I'll take it. Like, I'll totally take it, because the kids remember that. And then they remember that part of the language too, which is awesome. And that helps, especially when attendance is so bad that even when they do something crazy like that, they'll remember it. And that, all of a sudden they're like, anything with the weather, they just remember everything because we did this crazy thing and they were, there for it. And so even if they miss some stuff and coming back in, they're still willing to try to pick everything up and keep going, because they know they're going to probably do something crazy again and it's going to be fun.
That emotional component in learning is something that the impact of emotional experiences, not just necessarily negative, but plenty positive. And again, the body is such an important part of the research that you have done and you share with others. You do a lot of sessions. What kind of other professional sharing do you do, Brenda?
The sessions that I do are one, Teach Like a Rebel. I kind of go in the background of why the mind and the activities. I do a lot of like building community and mindset, those things. I've been putting up a lot of my stuff on Twitter so that people can see the activities, especially if they come to a session and they don't really remember it. I mean, we all know, like, going back to a PowerPoint, like, I don't get it. And especially when you're at a conference all day long, even though I do the activity with you, you might remember how you felt doing that activity. And you want your students to experience it too, but you might not necessarily even remember how to do it, even by looking at a piece of paper. So I've been really focusing on putting stuff up on Twitter and even sharing some of the students' experience or some of the things that they do and highlight like how far they've come with stuff. I just had a student last year. She submitted she writes her own poems, and we talked about, she was in ASL level 3, and we talked about like, how can we do this in ASL? And then we found a poetry competition in the world languages in our local area. And she submitted her poetry that she took and she put it into sign language, and she won. She got, an incentive for that. And we had a nice award ceremony with a bunch of like other students that were different things. But when you take a poem that you write and then she took it and put it into sign language, it's like you have that feeling and like you're expressing yourself in a whole different way than what it was on paper. So, and then she just got like really emotional with it. Like, just, it was like a whole nother experience all over again, because the way I had to get her to understand, like, you can't just sign word for word. You have to sign, like, what's the meaning behind that? What's the meaning behind that in the poem? Because when you read poetry, there's something more behind it. Like, what is the main thing? I'm like, that's what you have to express and show. You just can't be like, well, this is a sign. I'm talking about my crown. And I'm like, well, you're not really talking about a crown. You're talking about your hijab and how you feel with your hijab on. So you have to express that. So that is also something that's really cool to see with the kids.
That is very cool. I just have to say, I remember that the most effective way I got a young man who won the state award for his poetry recitation when I was coaching speech is by getting him to sing it, to practice it. And so that body, again, that engagement of the body, that emotion that's in there, that's a very moving story about that particular student. Do you have another story that illustrates a kind of a transformational experience for a young person?
Yeah, so I teach higher ed too as well, and I switched everything up when we were doing. I found a book that was just stories, like deaf people's stories and the way they felt and growing up. And we were just doing journals on them on a regular basis, because teaching deaf culture is very hard. It is not white or black. It's this gray area. Students have so many questions and they don't understand why it's not this way or that way, but how come this person's this and that? And I don't necessarily always have the right answer, because it is a hard area. Like, you have to be in the community to really experience and understand it. So I started this book with my higher ed students, and the journal prompts were just amazing. And then I so kindly just threw in this project that wasn't on the syllabus. But it was called the Identity Project. And I wanted them to connect, because when I was reading their journals, they were talking about like, oh my gosh, like I felt this way too. And, and they're all different cultures. They're all from different areas. Some of them speak more than one language as well. And they were just relating to it. And I wanted them to do a large project that relate to it. So they had all these different choices to do it, but every single student was like, yeah, I can't relate to deaf people. Like, I'm not deaf. And I'm like, no, you have in your journal prompt. Like, go back to your journal prompts, reread the stuff that you wrote, read some of the stuff that people wrote back to you, and then I said to them, and like, think of empathy. Like, what is empathy? Right. And they were starting, like, the light bulbs are starting to go off. And when I was reading these projects, like, I was like bawling my eyes out. Some of them did so well. And it was crazy because a lot of them started off with, when I was first told to do this project, I was like, what? I know, like, I'm not deaf. I can't do this. But then when they really picked like certain things like, bicultural, bilingual, being ostracized, like so many different things. And there's so many things that they dove into. It was just amazing. So then I decided, hey, let's try it with my high school students. And with my high school students, it's a little different because, like I said, I have that community. I have them in front of me. Whereas with my higher ed class, I have them on Zoom. So I teach online and but it's not the same. And we can still joke around and whatever. But like I said before, the circle is a very powerful thing. And when we would dive into some of the stories and the students connecting and sharing their stories in front of each other, some of them were just like realize so many things about themselves that they didn't know, and like the tears and everything that were happening. And then, others were like consoling each other and experience like, oh my gosh, I've experienced that too. And I'm in a very, very diverse school. I mean, I think we have like 42 different languages, and some of the languages are dying, and some of them we can't even find a translator for exams. And it was just amazing. And now we're opening up to seeing more of everyone's culture. So the whole thing is like, when we came down to it, and I'm like, what does this all mean to you guys? What is it that we're saying? I'm like, you're Arab, you're Asian, you're African-American, you're from India. We went through all these different things. And I was like, you're human. You're human. That's the biggest thing. You are human. And I think, and I was like, and you need to see that based on everything. What you guys have just shared, you don't see it in somebody. You don't look at somebody and see all those things. But yeah, you guys all can relate to each other more than you think. It doesn't have to be the same exact story, but it might be the same feeling. So that one right there, I just started that one right after COVID when we got back into school with my high school students. And that one is staying. And I still just, I have to do it a little bit towards the end of the year because we have to be very comfortable with each other to get that same experience. And then I still have them do a project with it too, but it's a little bit different after we read the stories because I were able to share in front of each other about it. And I know I teach sign language, but in reality, I think language, it was open up a gate to the world, right? Like, there are so many cultures and different languages and everything out there for us to accept. So in that moment, I'm not using sign language, but I want them to see I want them to dive in to culture and languages too, because that's awesome. I don't want them just to stick with sign language. I want them to see the world.
See humanity. You got them in the middle of humanity. You have co-founded a group for girls that has an identity kind of name too. I am me. Tell us more about that aspect and why you began that group.
So that was another accident. No, it was weird because it started kind of the same in both districts that I was in. The one district, we just said girls group, but then when I got to the one I'm in now, we actually identified a name and came with more things. And it was just a bunch of students who at first were not comfortable going to lunch and kind of coming in, during lunch and sitting. They were from different classes. Some of them might have been for the same classes, and then they would work on stuff with sign language, or what I used to do before. If you missed a day, you had to come in and sign during lunch. And if there was already a student that was signing or up in a higher level that was just hanging out, I'd be like, oh, you guys get to work together so I can eat my lunch. But it just kind of like developed, and it was awesome because it was a bunch of girls that they don't hang out with each other. They're not in the same circles. And then we just started having like a lunch group, and then like more started coming. And then they were like, we want this to be official. And I would take them on field trips. Like we went hiking, we did all the stuff, but they wanted it to be official and recognized. So then we came up with the name I Am Me, because we've always talked about, and I would do a lot of that mindset stuff in lunch too, because they were all over the place and just wanted to chat with each other about, and help each other out. That I am me, the same thing that we were talking about, like you're human. Like you don't have to be perfect. That's not a thing. But you can still develop and go for a goal. Just because where you are right now, that doesn't define you. And that's a big thing we talked about too. Like that doesn't define you. So then they came up with a name, and then we came up with, well, what is it that we do? Then I would ask them, what is it that we do? Well, how do you feel when we're together and we're talking about this stuff? How do you? So then they came up with that kind of like little mission. And then we would go out in the community because they needed to raise money, because they wanted to do things together, like go more hiking, camping, and learning those skills. And then I would get them out in the community and actually go into the local businesses. And now I'm teaching them how to speak to people like properly, and we talk about code switching, like what is like to be in front of somebody in a professional manner compared to when you're with your friends, and how it's different. And that was a huge thing for them to learn. And then I was like, these girls need so much more. So then I started inviting people in and giving them skills. So now they know how to like crochet, and we crocheted and knitted scarves for the homeless. They learned how to make jewelry, and actually tomorrow we're doing a craft show where they're selling their jewelry, but all that money is going towards 3 organizations that we're working with that involves women. So it's usually domestic violence or women that were incarcerated. And our seniors come up with those projects, but we're having a hard time selling stuff in school because there's new rules. So we took it out to the community, which they've done before too. So they're utilizing the things that they've learned in the skills, and turn around, and also learning how to run a business and how to talk to people. And I think that's really important. So I really try to find different things. Like I just try to think like, what did my grandma teach me when I was younger? Like what are the things? I'm like, oh my gosh, I know how to sew a button. Like, okay, guys, like we're going to learn how to sew a button. You don't have to go out and buy new jeans. We're just going to sew your button back on. So those skills too. And with them going out into the community and working with other women that are successful, women that have opened their own organizations, seeing that, or just, women who have struggled and where they are and what their story is, I think also helps them too. Like, this is where I live, this is where I'm from, but it's not going to define me. I'm not going to be this. And when I listen to my seniors tell their stories too, and they like, sometimes I don't even realize, I just think, oh, they're having fun. And they're like, I am me changed my life. And I'm like, what? How so? Because I'm just like, oh, I'm having so much fun. Yeah, life's great. But honestly, like that's like my baby. Like those girls. So I take in, and eventually turned into like an application process too. So we take in 5 girls from each grade level. So they come in as freshmen, and then they stay with us all the way to our seniors. And then my seniors become in charge of everything, and they pick the projects, and they pick the activities, and they work with the younger girls. But this group also pushes out stuff for the females in the building and outside of it for the district as well as the community. So it's not just like these girls are only like together and that's it. They are just a group of girls that do things for the community, and they're the ones that are putting it all together, and they love it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, how did this happen? How did I get all these beauties to just like love to volunteer, and go out on a Saturday and like hang out with Miss Buckley, like giving sandwiches to the homeless? They're like, think it's the greatest thing. So it's awesome to see.
Brilliant. It is awesome to see. And it's so neat that it unfolded in a very organic way with your attentiveness to it. How great that the girls are taking such leadership with that. It's an inspiring story, and it's all about the way that we can interact with humans. It's just great. Brenda, there's so many wonderful things that you're sharing, and I just do have to pull this together. But when I do, I'm going to ask you is, before we end, do you have something? What do you have to share or to exhort or to invite people to do, a thing that you either want to repeat or or bring up brand new that you just haven't said yet, whatever that definition is for you, so that as we finish up, you have the final word.
Mindset is huge. And some of the things that I push in my sessions, one is that you have more than one mindset. Believe it or not, like you have your own mindset, you have your classroom mindset, and you have a school mindset. You have multiple mindsets, and learn and figure out what those are and where those are, because they're not the same. They are not the same. Like your mindset as an individual of who you are is not going to be the exact same thing as your mindset in your classroom. So if you want your classroom to be a specific way, let the kids do the work. Let the kids bring in. And when I say do the work, I mean more of like come up with the activities, do the things that they want. But you also need to be a part of it, because you are that community. You're a part of that community too. And I always say in my class, this is not me. This is not you, even though I just told you guys it's all about me. I do say that, but I'm joking around with the kids. But this is a we situation. This is a we. And when my class gets off, we come back into a family meeting. I call it a family meeting. And I sit down. I'm like, all right, we're off. Like something's wrong here. What is it that we can fix? We. Like I always say we. It's not what can you fix. It's we. And I even might say sometimes it might be, I'm like doing this, or maybe I'm off my track, and they'll call me out too. Like the other day, I had a really bad day the day before, and I didn't realize I was carrying it over into the next day. And they're like, Buckley, you're off. Like, you're just off. Like, where are you? What are you doing? Like, where? And, and I'm vulnerable with them. And I know a lot of teachers don't like to share. And yes, you can like limit that share. But I think, especially in my situation in the urban setting, I think sharing is very important, because you're human and they see that you're human. And I'm telling you, like, students will be willing to do more, because the majority of them just do not like school. They will be willing to do more if they know they can relate to you, and more than just the fact that, cool, we're doing the same language. And I think that's very important. So be a human. Be okay with making those mistakes in front of them. Be okay with telling them that you made a mistake. Don't try to cover it up. And the more vulnerable that you are, the more the students will like open up, because they're going to start to see that you're not perfect and you're not this, they don't have to be this specific image. And that's why a lot of them shut down too. And they just stop doing the work. Cause they're like, they have that mindset. I can't do that. I can't reach that. Like, no way. So, and just be involved in the activities. I am always involved with the activities and being crazy with them too. And, even if you can't run, I still do like crazy stuff with them, like cheer them on, like, yeah, team, whatever they call themselves. So be with them, be a we, not a I or you.
Be a we. Therein lies a rebel statement with a purpose. Brenda Buckley, thank you so much for sharing your passion, your experience, and all of the insights that you have, and continue to thrive. Thank you for all that you're doing for young people and for communities that they live in and then go out to serve. Appreciate you today very much.
Thank you for having me and let me share.
Well, I hope you enjoy that energetic conversation with Brenda Buckley, and I suspect that the rubber chicken manufacturing industry is going to see an uptick in sales. I hope you'll go to my website, fluency.consulting, to connect up with Brenda, to see her bio, and to take a look at the resources that she alluded to during the podcast and extra ones that she shared with you in the post on my website. And I hope that you're inspired to continue your work through your language to connect up with the best in yourself and the best in others around the world. Until next time.